Hello everyone, my name is Dani and welcome to my channel Current Chapter. Today we're going to be talking about The Hazel Wood by Melissa Albert. So let's talk about books. In my reviews I like to give you the synopsis of the book and also a little bit of the good, the bad, and my overall thoughts on it. But with this book, this is a little bit hard because the first bad that I had to say about it is the synopsis. So let's get right into it. I think the synopsis of this book and the hype on it over the pacing of the book is kind of really bad because the synopsis sets the book to be something that it's not. And I was really disappointed by it because of what I thought it would be like. So that's my first thought on the book. I will get into more spoilery thoughts towards the end of the video and I will let you know when that happens, so you can turn it off if you haven't read the book. But I want to give you my synopsis for it. What I think should be written here instead of what actually is. The Hazel Wood is about a girl called Alice. Her grandmother is a very famous fairy tale author and she lives in this mansion called the Hazel Wood. Alice and her mom, Ella, don't have a very good relationship with her grandmother because they're always moving around, they never settle in one place. And Ella never wanted Alice to have a relationship with her grandmother, and she never explains why. Alice has never read her grandmother's fairy tales, her mom has never let her read it, and she doesn't think much about it until her grandma dies and her mom disappears, leaving behind a note saying, "Stay away from the Hazel Wood." This is already saying too much because all of this happens in like half the book. So that was my problem with it. The pacing of this book is not ideal to me. I think this should have happened in like 30 pages and then we could get on with the rest of the book. The premise of it is one of the positive things that I have to say. So it's about dark fairy tales and about these characters that her grandmother created that are not necessarily good. So I think that's very compelling and I thought it would be a more action-packed book than it actually is. Another thing that I'm gonna say that's negative about this book is that I didn't connect to the writing so much. I think there are too many comparisons that are just so weird and it will take me out of the book. Things like she's saying, "My throat tastes like a broken battery." What does that mean? That's the whole book. She just compares herself or what she's feeling or other people to things that don't make any sense. She says that her stepsister makes her look like a breadstick. What is that good? I don't know. It's just weird, and those things would take me out of the story. That's the problem that I had with it. It might be just me for sure. I mean, I'm not saying that this is bad writing necessarily. It's just not. It was not for me. But yeah, I didn't connect with it so much. Let's go back to the positive. Another positive thing that I have to say about this book was that the second half of the book, when all the action starts, is really exciting. Besides one small section there that I was just completely confused and didn't know what was happening, the rest of it it's really cool. I was really excited about it. There were a lot of things that I wanted to know what was going to happen next, so that was very exciting, but it didn't last for too long. It was just a couple of chapters and then it was over. And in those chapters we had the weird comparisons, so it wasn't great for me anyway. The last positive thing I'm going to say about this book was the big reveal. There is a big reveal in this book and that was really cool. I'm not sure it was worth it to me, but it was a good reward to get to that point in the book. And the last negative thing I want to say about this book is that it's so confusing. So this part, the beginning of the book is mostly just them traveling around and never settling, and she's looking for her mom, and that takes so much of the book. But then it gets to a part that I just had no idea what was going on. And I think one of the problems was that Alice has never read her grandma's fairy tales, and we don't get much about what the fairy tales are about either, so neither of us knew what was going on. anything small that happened that seemed to be important because it was related to the stories of the fairy tales, we didn't know. Me or Alice knew if that was important or not. So I didn't care enough to follow that part of the story because I just had no idea what was going on. It didn't make sense and not in a good way. So my overall thoughts on this book was that it was disappointing to me because I expected too much out of it. I was so excited to read it because of all the fairy tales, all the dark mystery behind it, and it just took so long to get there. And when we finally got there, I didn't know what was going on. So I was kind of disappointed about it, but I do recommend you read this book if you don't have this expectations on it, if you don't have expectations about the pacing of this book, and if you know that it's going to take a while to get to the more dark parts of the book. If I didn't know that, if I went blind in this book, I think it would have been much better for me. I might read the sequel. I'm not sure yet. If I find it cheap somewhere, I will try it. I'm not super excited about it. I didn't connect so much with the writing and with the story. I mean, I feel like I should have read her grandmother's fairy tales before reading this book to really connect to it. Of course, that's not possible. Now I just want to talk a little bit about my thoughts on the rest of the book. So if you have not read it, if you're interested in reading it, and you don't want to know any spoilers, turn this video off now and come back later when you have read this book so we can talk about it, because the spoilery parts are starting now. So, when Alice finally gets to Hazelwood, that was not a fairy tale for me. It was more like a dream sequence where everything was just changing, and I couldn't follow that. If I was listening to this on audiobook, I would have DNF'd it for sure, because I had to keep rereading parts of the book to just understand where she was and which point. I don't like so much dream sequences in books when they're like that, and that's what it felt like to me, so that part was a struggle to get through. Another thing that bothered me a lot with this book was that the rules didn't seem to make any sense. Anything could happen to any of the characters in Hinterland because everything was controlled by the spinner, but then the spinner comes and says that she can't do this one specific thing. Like, you could do everything until now, so you just don't want to do this, or you can't, or how does this thing actually work? It is a fairy tale, but things have to have rules in the world building for it to make sense. So that bothered me a lot because it just didn't seem to have a purpose. It was just too convenient for whatever the story needed in each point. Like I mentioned before, I feel like there are 3 books in here. So the first part is when they're traveling around in the city, and then she goes to Hazelwood and Hinterland in the beginning, and she's still herself. And after the big reveal, when she becomes Alice 3 times, that's an entire different story. I don't know what I was reading. I didn't even say what genre it is in the beginning of this video because I really don't know. Maybe that's why she's called Alice 3 times? That would be genius if that's it. I just thought of that now, actually. If that's it, you tell me in the description. Don't give spoilers to people who have not read it, but if that's the point of the book, okay, that would be really cool. But either way, you won't make me rate this any higher. Each part of the book was so different for me that it feels like I was reading a different book. It feels like each part of the book was written for a different type of reader. And I like the last part more, although that part when she describes her own birth was completely unnecessary. But I like the last part more. The first one is kind of like a contemporary with a little bit of mystery. Didn't care much for it. The part of the dream and Hazelwood, again, I didn't care much for it because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know any of the characters. Alice didn't know any of the characters. So didn't seem to have a purpose at all. But I see how each part could appeal to different readers, I guess. And the last thing I want to say is that I really like the review, and I feel like that story would be more interesting to tell than the one we got here. when Janet's telling her grandma's story of how she went to Hinterland and how she got out of there, and all that story that it's just told to us, I think that story was much more interesting than Ella's story. Uh, all the thing with Ella growing up and being raised around these characters. If she releases a book about that, I would be more interested in picking that up because that story sounded so much more compelling to me. But yeah, I really like the reveal of the book. I didn't expect that the way it happened, so that was really cool. But it didn't have to take so long for that to happen. And that's it for the review of this video. Thank you so much for watching until this part of the video. I'm so happy that you stick around with me, and let me know in the comments what you thought of this book, what were your opinions on it, what you think about the Alice 3 times thing that I just thought about. If you also had thought about that before, if I should have picked up on that, I guess. Just let me know. Let's talk about it. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.